The following is a production of Spark Study Club. To see the full video presentation and receive 1 CE credit, please visit sparkstudyclub.com and register for your free account today.
Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne with Spark Study Club, and welcome to this presentation and Q&A about clinical imaging that converts digital photography and videography in the microscope-centered practice with Dr. Glenn Van Az. Before we begin, I have an important announcement about how to receive your 1 PACE CE credit for this webinar. About an hour after we've wrapped up here, you'll receive an email to access this course module on our site, which includes the recording along with a survey. Please make sure you complete the survey to receive your credits. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us by email, support@sparkstudyclub.com, or by clicking contact us on our website. A special thank you to the sponsor for this webinar. It's Trusted Dental Technologies, providing innovative and cost-effective technologies and solutions, backed by trusted experts who deliver unparalleled customer service, training, and support. I think we all know Trusted Dental Technologies nowadays. And lastly, we want to remind everyone to use the Q&A feature in the control panel to ask any questions. They'll be answered at the end of the webinar as time permits. So now I am pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Glenn Van Az. He graduated from the University of British Columbia Faculty of Dentistry in 1987 and is a co-founder of the Academy of Microscope Dentistry, also known as AMED. He has been in full-time private general practice using operating microscopes since 1997 for 100% of his clinical dentistry. He has a 9 microscope practice in North Vancouver that involves cosmetic, endodontic, laser implant, and restorative microscope dentistry. In 2024, he was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Academy of Microscope Enhanced Dentistry for his continual efforts to educate new users on the advantages and challenges of operating microscope-centered practice. He has lectured in over 1,000 times in 35 countries on microscope, laser, aesthetic, and implant dentistry, and has published over 75 articles on the topics. I'm sure our paths have crossed when it comes to publishing content on microscope dentistry. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Van Az. Now I'll turn it over to you to learn more about digital photography and videography in a microscope-centered practice.
Thank you, Adrienne, for that wonderful introduction. Tonight's lecture is called Clinical Imaging That Converts, Digital Photography and Videography in the Microscope-Centered Practice. I'm Dr. Glenn Van Az. For the last 39 years or so, I've been working in North Vancouver, and I've built a niche practice that utilizes microscopes and lasers. I had 9 rooms, and in each of those 9 operatories, I had a microscope. Recently, in the last month, I'd moved to Victoria, about 100 kilometers, 60 miles away, and I'm opening up a new practice there within an experienced office. So I'm having to set up all over again with my microscopes and lasers in semi-retirement, where I'm working 3 days a week. Thanks for today before we start are included to Trusted Dental, Global Surgical, and Jeremy Heiser for helping to sponsor this particular webinar. By full disclosure, I am receiving an honorarium for the webinar itself. I want to thank Adrienne, Michelle, and the Spark Study Club for supporting the lecture and giving me a format to lecture in. And finally, I want to thank you for attending today, because there's a lot of things you could be doing, and you're spending an hour with me learning about microscope photography and videography. Tonight, we're going to talk briefly about the history of documentation with the operating microscope. I'm going to discuss with you basic armamentarium required for documenting, and we'll go through some clinical tips for improving your documentation. Personally, I was involved as one of the 2 co-founders with David Clark for setting up the Academy of Microscope Enhanced Dentistry 25 years ago. I've lectured over 1,000 times in 35 countries, primarily on microscopes and lasers. And I was presented with the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Academy of Microscope Enhanced Dentistry in 2024. My journey itself to building a microscope-centered practice started almost 30 years ago. And I started in 1997 with one primary focus, and that was to do better endo. And at that time, endo was becoming the standard of care with the microscope. It was being utilized in all the schools. and I started to purchase one for the simple reason I wanted to do better endo. I realized quickly there were some benefits of the microscope that could be used for all my clinical work, and so I have now developed a practice where I've been using it for everything from hygiene checks all the way through to restorative dentistry, implants, endo, cosmetic, and laser dentistry. I used it 100% of my time in my old office, as I mentioned, and even my hygienists were using it. You could choose to do the same or use it where needed within your own practice. When you look at the documentation, the microscope, and sort of the history of it, in 1997, digital cameras were not around, and so at that point, I started with slide photography. Slide photography required a flash because there wasn't enough light that would get to the camera. And when you got your slides developed, you would get them back, you would rush to pick them up, and inevitably out of the 24 slides, 3 of them would be in focus and properly framed. So it was really frustrating because you didn't get immediate impact or immediate results. And so it was really a difficult challenge to document a whole case. You took numerous photographs of different settings to just try and get a couple of them that worked out well. But interestingly enough, in 1999, Nikon came out with the Nikon Coolpix 950, and that was a revolutionary stride in documentation with the microscope, because now you could see your images instantly and you're able to delete them, change them without having to wait for the slides to be developed before you realize that your patient was long gone and the slides were not in focus or were poorly illuminated. I have produced 3 DVDs over time, first in 2003, the last in 2008, where we talk about positioning, ergonomics, and utilizing the microscope for a variety of factors. And back in those early years, 20 years ago, we were really having difficulty because you needed one setup for video and one setup for stills. For those of you young professionals, you would hardly be able to imagine that you would have to swap out a camera to take a video of a case and then put a camera back on for taking photography. But indeed, that was the case in the early years. Here you can see me on the left-hand side with a video camera like a Sony Handycam, just working on a set of models. And we had large LCD screens and a ring flash on the camera just to be able to get enough light to be able to take photographs. Over time, what's happened is cameras and documentation have changed, so they're lighter. They are able to take both photography and videography, so you don't need these heavy setups on your microscope, and expensive as well. You can see here again on the right-hand side of my final DVD release, you can see that we're actually showing you a video camera for shooting videos. You would have all these little tapes. And beside that, I have an SLR camera, a Nikon camera with a ring flash on the microscope to take photographs. Both these were digital, but it took a lot of time to integrate video into your presentations or to be able to get the photography done. It was heavy and hard to move the microscope. Here again are some more videos showing me at the scope when I had hair many years ago, 20 years ago, and the setups that we had back then. You're able to take some pretty outstanding photography with the ring flash to show incipient decay, to show an implant abutment, an MB1 and MB2 canal. Here, interproximal restoration with the decay going through the enamel, even a small crack, a tooth that was extracted, cleaning up some veneer cement on a case at high magnification, and cracks. We all see lots of cracks in teeth, and these are easy to be documented with the operating microscope. Nowadays, we have one camera on our scope. It shoots both video and stills and can give you a tremendous opportunity to document your cases in whatever format you like. Over time, I've discovered that there are 4 benefits to using the operating microscope. The first being increased precision of treatment. Like ergo loops that have multiple magnifications, a microscope that I use has 6 steps of magnification that ranges from 2 times mag up to a high mag of almost 20 times. It can be used in all aspects of clinical dentistry, not just endodontics. You're sitting upright. That's why ergo loops have become so popular, is because instead of having to be bent over, creating more back and neck pain, the microscope sits you comfortably slumped in an upright posture. With the video that you have on the microscope, you have improved communication with the monitors, with patients who can watch the procedures, team members, and colleagues. So an over-the-shoulder becomes instantly much more interesting as they can watch on the monitors at real time what you're seeing in the microscope. The final advantage is increased ease of documentation. Instead of having to take your gloves off or put on over gloves, you are able to simply capture images and video in real time while you're working. Kerry Beale in the late 1990s said that digital photography with the operating microscope was easier, faster, more efficient, and more enjoyable, and that it could yield results financially because of being able to show the patients what was going on, and involved improved communication between the patients and the dental team. There are multiple reasons why you may be considering documenting through your microscope. First is patient education. Patients trust the dentist is able to show them in real time what they're doing. And I would say roughly half the patients that I have in my practice will want to watch the procedure in real time. Medical legal. In today's litigious society, we may want to have photographs and or video for patient records. If you're a specialist, you may want to take stills to be able to share with your general dentist who are referring to you. Teaching, lecturing, presenting, you need also videos and stills to be able to share. If you're publishing articles or textbooks, or finally creating videos or for sale or patient education. I have a friend of mine who has a YouTube channel, and he is really keen on sharing his videos of his presentation for patients to see. Some of these may require a different setup. For somebody who is simply wanting to use it for medical legal, for insurance purposes, they may have a different setup from somebody who wants to have high-end photography or video for teaching, publishing textbooks or articles. There are 5 questions you should ask yourself before you buy a camera system for your scope. First, what do you want the documentation to do for your practice? Are you looking for simply to document your cases, to share with your referring dentist? What is your level of experience with the microscope? Because you need to be able to position the microscope at high magnification, like you see here, at 8 power to be able to capture the crack that is visible running from distal to mesial. What is your level of experience with photography, video, and computers? Some people are really adept at cameras and settings. Other people have no idea from the front end to the back end of the camera. If you're not that sure of your skills, are you able to spend time improving these skills? I used to spend a day a week on Fridays with a quiet environment, just a couple patients, where my main focus was on learning how to improve my manipulation of the scope and my camera and documentation skills. You may not want to do that, but that's what I did in my early years. And what is your overall budget? Because you can go from a fairly low budget entry to a very expensive budget depending on what you want to spend for the documentation. In the end, you have to look at what are your skills right now and are you willing to spend time to improve them? So what are the essential parts for your microscope system? The first is something called a beam splitter that you see here, which splits the light and the image through a prism. So 50% goes to the camera to the right and 50% goes to your eyes. This is a traditional beam splitter. It's got a little prism in there, and the light and illumination is transferred through the beam splitter to the cameras. So half the light goes to your eyes and half goes to the cameras. In the old days, you had either a xenon light or a metal halide light, and these have been replaced with LED lights, which last much longer than the bulbs from halogen, xenon, or xenon or LED systems are extremely bright now, and they last 30,000 hours. In the old days, you just could not get enough light. You had to use a ring flash or accept that your images would be blurry because there was just not enough light coming to the cameras. Previously, as mentioned, you had to use a xenon light or a ring flash. These were heavy and expensive alterations that you had to put onto your scope to get good images. I also have a dual iris, which I use kind of like an aperture on a camera to try and increase the depth of field. The dual iris can be used as long as you have enough light coming to the system to block out the light and make it so that the depth of field can be increased. And nowadays, today's either crop censored cameras like Sony Alpha 6500 to 6700 or the Sony Alpha full frame series can be effectively used on the microscope. On your left-hand side, you'll see the dual iris in effect. And what it does is a simple aperture to give depth of field. So on the left-hand side, you see it being put in. Right now, the dual iris is put in, and it acts on the right-hand side in the image. You can see how it acts as a filter just to increase the depth of field. It's a simple sliding adjustment, and I use this quite a bit to increase the depth at high magnification. Often in microscope photography, your eye is drawn to the fact that it's blurry, unlike traditional photography. The reason being is that you only have 2 to 4 millimeters of depth of field at high mag. And this can be increased a little bit with the dual iris, as you see here, to increase your depth of field. Varifocus has become a primary thing for most microscope users. It allows you, when you switch magnifications, to be able to simply roll the lever there, either to the right or to the left, to get back into focus. It is also very useful for photography. If you have your camera connected to a large screen, you are able to see quickly that you are in or out of focus and be able to roll either a little bit too close or a little bit too far to get the proper focus if your camera is connected to a big screen. And that is one of the keys for getting ideal photographs and video. You have to have a large monitor and have your camera live view so that you are able to see on the monitor what's going on. If you try and see it from the back of your LED camera, it's useless. The camera monitor on the LED on the back of the camera is so small you cannot tell if your image is in focus or not. There's protective lenses that you can see green here for global, or the new gray one that you can put onto the bottom of your scope that will help you. I still find that it leaves a bit of a glare, and so many times I will not use these protective filters myself, but you do risk damaging your objective lens over time as pieces of amalgam and debris flies up and splatters on the bottom of the objective lens. Be careful if you don't use the objective lens because your objective lens cover, because your lens itself will pit and scratch, and you be careful when wiping it down with chemicals because the coatings on there can quickly degrade with some of the more abrasive chemicals we use for disinfection. When you look at the options that are available for both photography and video, there are multiple, and I'll share with you some of them right now. With respect to global, most camera companies have their own dedicated, what I call medical grade cube camera. You can see this on the right hand side. It's a little cube and it has either HD or now even 4K video that you can run through HDMI to various monitors in your office. If you have cameras like this, they can be on full time, and they're primarily used for educating patients or for having your assistant see what's going on. And this is the little video camera that can be run by, as I mentioned, HDMI. It's easy to run to your computer and to capture if you have a fast computer. It's great for video to assistance monitors. So if you have a little video camera like this, the benefit is that it's very lightweight. You can hook it up, but it is something that you would buy from your microscope manufacturer. Some microscopes like ZoomX or Alteon, these companies have built-in HD or 4K cameras that you have built into the microscope itself. So you can see now, here's Global's 4K video system. Again, a very similar camera that you can run to your video monitors to allow patients and assistants to watch what you're doing. Alteon has it built into their microscope, so you see the two buttons in the red circle there. One is for video, one is for stills, and this will run to an SD card which is a camera card that you can remove and save your files, either transfer it into your patient's file or to utilize the videos or photographs for lecturing. When you look at dedicated cameras, like what I'm using here, you have two choices. The first is a crop sensor. I use Sony, but Nikon and Canon also make very good cameras. These cameras are 20 megapixel cameras. They have a crop sensor, so it's not full frame. You have expanded now ISOs, which allow you to work at film speeds that are a little bit darker so that you can not have to worry. And you have a movie mode that's full HD or in some cases 4K. Remember, the 4K files are huge and you need a fast computer to work with them. So be careful what format you're using. The more detail that you provide in your videos, the higher the file size. If you look at full frame cameras, such as in Sony Alpha series, Canon has full frames, so do Nikon. These cameras are heavier, but they capture more of the field. You have a full frame sensor, you have higher film speeds. These are more expensive. They have often full HD or in some cases 4K. And you can attach them either with a CG optic adapter in global cases or the global zone adapter. And on the right-hand side, you see a remote that you can use to record or to capture stills. Your assistant can do it. You just say, go ahead, and she presses the shutter and she can capture a still. My settings for digital SLR photography, you can wait here at the end and capture a screenshot if you wish, but you're in aperture or shutter mode priority. I leave auto ISO on, which means that if it's at higher mag, it will increase the film speed so you don't get blurring. White balance is auto or custom white balance. I think the minimum shutter speed you should ever use is 1/125th. I often try and use 1/200th as my minimum. The resolution depends on what you're using for, because the more resolution you have, the higher the file size, and the detail should be fine, the fine setting. When we look at the settings for video, I don't do a lot of video in my office, but dentists like Dr. Michael Wenzel, who's made a living on documenting his cases in video, will put the camera in manual mode. He'll shoot it in 1080 or 4K at 30 frames per second. Auto ISO is on and the range goes again from 100 to 12,800. His shutter speed is 1/60th and the aperture will read 0 as the camera does not have a lens attached. Other documentations, companies like ZoomX have GoPro, where you can put a little GoPro camera on. It is enhanced low light performance. It's small and lightweight. So if you have a GoPro, you can buy an adapter from them. And if you have a ZoomX scope, or a oscilloscope, you can utilize your GoPro in your office if you wish. Other people have iPhones, and I know it's very popular to have an iPhone adapter. You can put those photos and videos on your phone, be able to have access to them. Just remember that their photos and videos will not be as good as a dedicated SLR camera, and that you will have an image that is easy to access, but it is, again, perhaps not as high quality as something from a dedicated SLR camera. Other options, Zeiss has their own proprietary, where they have a Zeiss Connect. You can connect it to an iPad, you can connect it to a monitor. It's especially useful for specialists who want to categorize and organize their clinical cases. And Zeiss Observe allows video to be streamed real time to an iPhone or to virtual glasses, so patients can watch through the Zeiss Observe app. One simple situation which you can use is to get one of these capture devices. The Magwell device that you see here is an intermediary between your video. So if you have a medical grade cube camera on your scope, you can run the video to one of these capture devices, and then from the capture device to your computer, and be able to capture into your software. The image file sizes are small. The quality is not as good as an SLR, but it's a simple situation. Less expensive than some of the other situations, and you just capture the images directly into your software. The one negative thing is you need to have a fairly advanced computer. If you have a computer that is many years old, you may find it is good for insurance purposes and simple documentation, but not good for capturing stills from video. The capture dongle, as I mentioned, has HDMI coming in and HDMI coming out, and you can simply connect it to your practice management software and capture images like this. It's simple to use. It's what you see is what you get. The image is directly entered into your software, and it's not a huge file size. But if you're going to lecture, it becomes pixelated, and definitely for publications, you're going to have a problem because the file size is going to be simply too small. So let's now spend a little bit of time to talk about clinical tips. This is not maybe for all of you, but if you want to improve your photography, you have to be able to spend the time, and it can't be done during a busy day. Excellence at doing clinical photography like the cracks you see here requires experience moving the microscope. As I mentioned, the images on the right-hand side are shot at 16 power. It is extremely difficult to get these images unless you crop a low power magnification and zoom in on it, which I did not do. You need to know how to manipulate your camera. You depend on the equipment used. An SLR with a ring flash will give better photos to the discriminating eye. But again, do you want the ring flash going off all the time, the patient getting blinded all the time? During a busy day is not the time to play with the settings or to figure out how to improve your photos. If you've got patients in the chair, you don't want to be fidgeting around with your camera trying to get proper images. So what I used to do, I used to come in and take photos of wedges, take extracted teeth, take endodontic files, and practice my photography both direct on the tooth and with mirrors. I would then see what works and what doesn't. It's vital that you have your microscope parfocal, meaning what you see through the microscope is what the camera is capturing. And there are now ways that you can do this, either by parfocling the microscope in traditional ways or by using a monitor and looking at the monitor to see whether what you're seeing through the microscope is what the camera is capturing, because many people will complain that it's out of focus. And this is why the little monitor on the back of the camera is useless. You will not be able to see unless you have a big monitor. It's much more helpful to have a large monitor connected to your camera so that you can see whether the image is sharp and in focus. So you can see here my 40-inch monitor at the foot of my chair that I had, and I could then see whether the image was in focus at the bottom or out of focus at the top, and it's not very much difference between those two. Parfocling a microscope, it's important to do, and there's 3 different ways you can do it, or 2 different ways you can do it. The objective is to get the microscope eyepiece and the camera to focus at the same distance. So the first way is you position the microscope above an X on a white piece of paper. You set both of your eyepiece diopters to 0. You set the microscope near the middle of its focal range, and then you shift it to the highest magnification until and moving the fine focus until a sharp image is obtained. So once you get a sharp image at the highest magnification, without moving the microscope, you then go to the lowest magnification and individually focus your left and right eyepieces one at a time by turning the diopter ring until that image is clear. You don't want to mess with the eyepieces after that. It is now set. You repeat it a few times, and remember, every few months you're going to have to continue to do this because your eyes will change. Method 2 involves using a monitor like you see here. You connect your microscope and the camera via HDMI out to a TV or a monitor. And when the image is sharp through the oculars, you then check on the TV and you adjust your varifocus to get the image sharp on the TV. Then what you're seeing through the eyepieces is what the camera is picking up, and you know it's going to be sharp. Recognize that when you change magnification, sometimes it will not be sharp unless you get this sharp at the highest magnification. So a lot of times I tend not to move the varifocus for ergonomic purposes because I know it's going to alter my image of my camera. I have 4 monitors in the operatory for microscope center practice. The first is behind the patient in the rear wall for digital charting, for entering treatment notes, etc. A second one is in the TV, And I would suggest with the cost of monitors that if you're going to do this for the patient to see, do not put it directly above the patient's head in the microscope, but slightly to the one side or the other and behind the patient, so that when the microscope is centered over their mouth, that they can look around the microscope to see what's going on. That can be for TV or live video from the microscope, and many patients wanted to watch what I was doing. As you can see on my right-hand side across from the assistant is a monitor for her to see what I'm doing. It's positioned so that she just has to lift her eyes up, not her whole head, to see what I'm looking at. And then there's a microscope monitor at the foot of the chair, which is documenting, in this case, an uncovering procedure. So it's a large 40-inch monitor that I would then be able to, at the end of the procedure, shift the patient up and be able to show them what was going on. So blue monitor behind the patient for insurance purposes, not connected to the microscope. Monitor 2 is the assistant monitor in the wall directly opposite the assistant. Number 3 is in the ceiling for the patient to watch what was going on. And the final one was at the foot of the chair. To me, the single best way to improve your photos, the single best way is to have a monitor connected to your camera. If you do not, you're going to struggle. It allows you to frame, focus, and expose your photographs. It's connected, as I mentioned, through HDMI or video that runs through the microscope arm up into the ceiling and back down into the monitor. And it allows you to have live view where what you're seeing through the microscope is what is on the monitor. The monitor, often I'll sit the patient up at the end of the procedure if they've been anxious and show them where the crack is. Show them why there is another tooth that has decay. Show them, if you're an endodontist, why the MB2 is missed. So the monitor that you have there can be utilized to educate patients, and it's a big screen monitor where I can just roll through the images and tell them, here's the cavity, here it's all cleaned out, here's your new filling. Many images, and you just play them back through screenplay, and it's a very effective way at educating patients as to what was done. For creating sharp images, sometimes if you have a little bit of water or a little bit of debris in the canals, especially through gold crowns, the liquid or the debris will help the camera focus properly. Try with a little debris around the canal, or try shooting after bonding. Works well, as again, to get sharp images. To get good illumination, I use the Zirk mirrors, which are called Rotor in Europe. And these Zirk mirrors come in various sizes, but they're far, far brighter than the standard scratched up mirrors that your hygienists have been using. If you have these, you'll be amazed that this is a standard normal mirror, and this is the Zirk mirror. I haven't enhanced anything. That's the image you get. It's so much brighter. So again, I use these mirrors all the time. They come in 3, 4, and 5 sizes, and you can buy the plastic handle ones or even ones that you can screw into your handle. The smaller mirrors are really useful for working in the posterior of the jaw, both the upper and lower. You can get a smaller mirror works well for upper and lower second molars. If you want to shoot a whole sextant of restorations, lower your mag and utilize one of these larger mirrors that are typically used for orthodontics to capture a whole quadrant in the posterior. They're not as bright as the Zirk mirrors, but they give you a greater coverage in a larger area. Everybody has a dominant eye, and the dominant eye in 2/3 of people will be your right eye, but it can be your left, and you want your camera system ideally to be on that dominant eye, because microscopes have 2 optical pathways and each sees differently. So you can find your dominant eye by creating a small circle, looking in the distance at something, and whenever you close your dominant eye, the image will move. So you want your camera to be on your dominant eye. If you want to find out more, Google how to find my dominant eye and make sure your camera is on that side of the beam splitter. If you edit photos, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're lecturing or you're publishing, you can take a little photo and you can edit the brightness, the sharpness, the detail to make it look clearer. There are many programs for this, including Lightroom, Photoshop that you can utilize, and even nowadays the simple systems that come on an iMac or a computer that you can get simple systems that will allow you to change the exposure, the clarity, and the sharpness. There you can see an image on the left, an image on the right. You can sharpen them, especially for lecture purposes. It's nice to crop these images as well. So in conclusion, microscope center practices have different ergonomics and different positioning skills than a traditional dental operatory. A simple system of capturing HD or 4K video will appeal to many users for its simplicity. Run the image, the video, to a camera card through either your magwell or into your computer. If you have a newer computer, you can just capture what you see is what you get, and it's almost like a live intraoral video camera. Microscope enthusiasts today can have an assortment of digital SLRs, Sony full frame and crop sensors for great still photography, particularly if you have a camera system already, or if you already know quite a bit about cameras. That's an alternative for both photography and video. And documentation can greatly enhance the ability to communicate with patients, team members, colleagues, labs. You can utilize the documentation to easily communicate with people. I want to thank you for your attention. I hope that I provided some interest for you and how you can create a niche type practice that can build value to your patients and also be utilized as a subtle marketing tool to build trust, because seeing is believing, and patients will remember 10% of what they hear and 50% of what they see. And I found that microscope documentation in the microscope center practice can be a very effective way of separating yourself from your colleagues down the street and building trust with your patients who are able to see in real time what you're doing, and I do appreciate it. So thank you very much. And now we'll turn back to Adrian for a few Q&A questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Van Naz. That was a very insightful presentation on digital photography and videography in a microscope center practice. We do have some questions coming, but before I get to those, I'd like to remind everyone to use the Q&A feature in the control panel on your screen to ask any questions. Okay, so does video provide any meaningful advantage to labs or patients that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think stills are a better opportunity. There are times when a short video clip can be utilized to help the lab to see perhaps where something that you want something changed. If you're working in a cosmetic case where a patient's speaking, sometimes video is better to show the lab where perhaps there's an incisal cant, or that you want to change something in the way that the final restorations are done. I find that in the majority of the time, the labs prefer just simply still photography done from the microscope, both to show the things that are right and also the things that you want to improve on.
Okay. And in a posterior crown case with limited access, how are you positioning the microscope and camera without disrupting ergonomics?
Yeah, in the say the posterior, the upper and the lower molar, sometimes with a patient with limited opening, you have to make everything smaller because you have a limited size of the operating field. So smaller suction tips, smaller burrs are required. So both smaller in diameter and also smaller in the length of the shaft, smaller hand pieces, and smaller mirrors. So I often use size 2 or 3 instead of a 5. I have both on the tray, and I'll grab the smaller mirror just to reduce the size of it to be able to see. You can bump up the magnification with those smaller mirrors and still be able to see perfectly fine. But yeah, for sure in the posterior region, particularly with endodontics, sometimes you have to minimize everything.
Okay. And how do you document margin integrity or prep design in a way that's actually useful?
Yeah, I think you have to remember that when you use higher magnifications, the depth of field changes. So some people like to shoot at lower magnification and then zoom in and crop. That way they'll be able to keep a better depth of field, because at the highest magnifications, you're only at 2 to 4 millimeters of your depth of field. So you'll see microscope photography and it'll look blurry because something will be in focus, but other parts of the field are not. So one thing that you can do is when you're looking at trying to improve your microscope photography for lab work and for margin integrity is to do the bulk of your preparation work at 2.5, 3 power, and then zoom in towards the very end. uh, for your final margins, just to get something really nice. And then if you want, zoom back out and then digitally crop that. And then when you do that and you zoom in, you get a more depth of field.
Okay. And let's see. Oh, how do you store and organize this volume of data without creating
Yeah,
compliance
it's a
issues? That's a good
It's a
question.
great question.
Yeah.
The file sizes for some of the newer digital cameras are can be quite high, and so if you're putting all these photographs into your software, pretty soon your software gets bogged down. Typically, what I'll do is I actually don't because I'm using a camera with an SD card. I'll remove the SD card and I'll just load only the photographs that I want. I keep the SD card for lecture purposes. I keep that, but if I'm going to load it up, you can keep the file size fairly small by reducing the size of the photograph to say 800 by 600 or slightly bigger, and then the file size is nominal, choosing the files that you want. If you have a system where you're actually just capturing a screenshot from a video, those file sizes are pretty small, and then you don't have to worry so much about bogging down your computer. But again, selectively choosing the images you want will help you keep your server and your file sizes from getting overwhelming.
Okay, that's a good answer. So do you ever get pushbacks from patients that feel uncomfortable being recorded?
Yeah, it's a really good question. As I mentioned in the lecture, I have 3 or 4 monitors in the operating room. So I have one at the foot of the chair, one above the ceiling, and one for the assistant. And sometimes I'll turn those off because the patient is quite squeamish. The interesting thing is about 50% of the time the patients will watch and they like it, even for things like extractions or endo, they'll watch. And I like it because they hold still. And secondly, as we were talking about converting people, the patients that are watching, they will often say, "Hey, that was really cool, that tooth that you did. Can you look at the one beside it? That's got a big filling in it too. What do you think we should do with that one?" So you actually get some patients who are
Right.
not only interested in what you're doing, but they're also it's a subtle marketing tool and it builds trust.
I think that's I can't say that that's ever been the case any dental office I've been to where I can actually see what they're doing, and I'd be fascinated. And I don't know if it's just because I work in the industry, but I think anyone just being able to see what the
You'd be
doctor's
surprised.
doing, you know.
They're actually looking at the reflection in your loupes in your glasses. They're looking to see what is going
Hmm.
on. And a
Yeah.
lot of patients, as long as they're anesthetized, they'll tell me that knowing what you were doing was one interesting, but also took a lot of the fear about where they were. And they don't
Right.
really know what you're doing, so they're not going to judge you afterwards. But the majority of the patients, I will say, there are some that are very anxious to say, "Please turn off the monitors." And I'm like, okay, but I have a fair number of patients that will say, "Hey, you put it up on the television up above," and I forget. And I go, "Oh yeah, yeah, no problem," because they want to watch. So I
Yeah.
built a niche practice that way by being able to
I love
co-observe and
that.
co-treat.
I love that. I think that's amazing. I expect
Yep.
just maybe not when you're doing the numbing part. Maybe that maybe that
No,
part turn the monitor
no.
off.
Yeah, I lift it up. I sometimes lift it up so it's not really in focus, and then they got their eyes closed most of the time. But for the rest of the time, you'd be surprised at how many patients will watch.
That's pretty cool. And being that you're, in a GP practice, it could be for anything, not just, actual procedures. So that's really cool.
It's like a live intraoral camera. Intraoral cameras
Yeah.
capture the image and you show it. But in this case, particularly for new patient exams, to be able to bring in a new patient and switch between 2.5 and 10 power to say, "Hey, that filling has actually got a crack in it. It's ready to come out. It's
Yeah.
loose." They'll say, "No, I never felt it." Then I can actually just zoom in on it and be able to show them, "Hey, there it is. You can see the crack. You can see
Right.
it's moving. It needs to be replaced." So those
They're
kind of
seeing what you're
things or
seeing.
cracks on teeth can really be
Mhm.
educational for patients.
Yeah, I love that. That's very cool. Okay. Here's another question. What is the minimum viable setup to get started without over investing?
Yeah, a lot of microscopes are set up so that you can add to it. You need a beam splitter. That's the one thing you need that converts, as I mentioned in the lecture, converts the image and the light 50% to the camera and 50% to your eye. So you need a beam splitter. If you are not, as I mentioned in the lecture, if you're not somebody who's really a camera aficionado or microscope aficionado, sometimes the simplest thing is just to run the video from like you some microscopes now come with built-in video and you just press a button and it will capture an image or press another button that captures a video on an SD card. But many times all you want is a beam splitter a microscope video, like from the manufacturer, and then you run that to your software, and then you can capture an image almost like an intro camera, the same way. That's the simplest process to be able to capture, and you have to pay for a beam splitter, you have to pay for the video system, and some form of capture card in your software.
So that kind of leads into this next question that's asking about integrating it into your existing workflow without disrupting what you already have going on. So can you
Yeah, and I think
explain?
that's what a lot of people want.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the lecture, if you're somebody who wants to lecture or you're going to publish, the file sizes and the files from these screen captures are probably not going to be large enough to publish, and you're going to need a different system. But
Hmm.
the simplest, what you see is what you get, is to run the video to your computer and then to capture a screenshot that goes directly into your software. Having said that, one thing that you'll find is that when you do that, some people will have a computer system that's older, and it just will not be, it bogs down with the video, especially if you have a 4K. If you have a 4K video system and you have an older computer, it will not show you the screen capture. It'll be stuttery and
Hmm.
stuttering along. So you have to choose a different system or upgrade your computers.
Okay. Okay. Well, that does, I mean, as far as this being applicable to like a GP practice versus like a high-end practice, one of the questions was asking like what the benefits are or like for it being in a high-end practice versus like a bread and butter type of practice. That's probably one of the that's probably one of the things is making sure you have the right equipment to house everything. But do you have any other notes on that as far as benefits go to both types of practice?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned in the lecture, it really depends on what you're looking to do with the documentation. I
Hmm.
know a dentist who actually would shoot a new patient video and actually take that video and send it with the patient home.
So cool.
And the
Love that.
patient could actually see their whole mouth scanned. I have other people who are, say, root canal specialists, and they're talking to the referring doc who's just put a 3-unit bridge on, and one of the abutments is actually fractured. And then he goes into the tooth and finds out that it's not salvageable. You can imagine the patient's upset. They've just paid for this new bridge. That specialist needs to be able to document that that crack is there and needs to be able to put it into the report. So it depends on what, are you lecturing? Are you just looking for insurance purposes to just capture a quick screenshot of what you see and put it into your system? That's the vast majority of people. They want to keep it simple. And I think a lot of people grab cameras and then find that they're not able to really get good photos. They're out of blurry. They get frustrated. So sometimes what you see is what you get. The simplest situation for many people is the best.
Okay. And then another question is, are there any mistakes that you potentially made when you were first adopting a microscope and imaging in your practice, or is there anything that's kind of common that if somebody's looking into purchasing a microscope, what they might want to look out for?
It kind of weaves back to the question you asked earlier about, do you have to purchase everything to begin with? You don't. And as I mentioned in the lecture, in order to get good photography, you need to be able to handle the microscope at high magnification.
Hmm.
And many people are only using the microscope at the lowest magnifications, and their photography is underwhelming. And then when they try to manipulate the microscope at, say, 10 times mag, they can't get the image in focus, they can't get it centered. And so the photography that is kind of poor. So you have to learn how to manipulate the microscope and your cameras in order to get good photography. And people think it's simple because they've been taking photography with their SLR cameras at work, but it's not as simple as that. So I used to practice a lot, as I mentioned, after hours, sometimes on Fridays, or I would have a reduced day where I would have more time to spend with the patients to get good photography. And secondly, over the years, I spent an awful lot because camera systems have kind of settled out, like computer systems did way back when, where every time you had to get a new computer because the software wasn't able to be provided on. But cameras have settled down now, and for many years, I ended up having to purchase camera equipment, camera equipment, and it's all sitting in a locker because it kept getting replaced by the newer, better cameras.
Yeah.
So, nowadays you're lucky because you can buy a camera, be it from Canon or Sony or Nikon. You can buy a camera, you can put it on your microscope, and you don't have to worry that in 6 months or a year and a half, it's going to come out with a new system and yours is outdated. So that's kind of the mistakes that I had to make is constantly upgrading my camera systems. I haven't purchased anything in 5 or 6 years. My wife's happy, so.
Well, I'm sure that, purchasing an item like this through a company like Trusted Dental, I'm sure that they have plenty of staff members that would help in terms of setting up and training and adopting, what makes your practice efficient as well. So I'm sure that there are, systems or courses that exist that doctors can take to improve their efficiency with
Yeah,
it
and
as
I
well.
think also, I think it's a really good question, Adrian, but I think also what a lot of people will find is that they really have to focus on what is the priority for the documentation in their practice? Is it just
Mhm.
simple for medical legal? Is it for lecturing? Do you want to have a YouTube channel? I know people who've had YouTube channels where their primary focus was on educating patients. And so of course, they wanted video and they didn't want to have stills. They wanted to have video, and that was the primary focus on it. So choose what you want the camera system to do. Talk to the sales reps of the microscope company that you have. Find, the various costs associated with it, and recognize one system isn't for everybody. The system that might be for
Right.
me for publishing might be completely different than you, who just want to take photographs and put them into the software and show patients or document cases so that you don't get sued.
Very cool. I'd love to see, I don't know if you already have this, but I would love to see like a video of like how your workflow in your practice, what that looks like when you see a patient, like in your GP practice, because again, knowing that you have the monitors up and they can see what you're doing is just really cool concept. Definitely something a lot of GPs could adopt. But we have run out of time today. So if you have any questions that were not addressed here, we can address them via email, just so you guys know. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we close today?
No, thank you for having me. I think, you know, in today's competitive marketplace, particularly in North America, I'm in Victoria now, but in Canada and US, there's a dental practice on every street corner, like Starbucks or cannabis stores here in Vancouver. So you have to separate yourself, and either it's on service or it's on your team, or you have to separate yourself. What you provide, an endodontist is providing, specialized treatments, and you have to provide something that's unique. And I was able to do that with the microscope, with building trust with patients, with showing them, and utilizing the documentation for the microscope to separate me, to build trust and to separate my practice from others. And I think other people can do that. It's fun. It's unique. It creates a niche type practice, and where patients want to come in and they'll always say, "I've never had this done before. I've never seen some of my teeth up that close." So look into it. I mean, I'm not unique. I think you can build your own practice that way as well. So thank you for having me. I hope it's been interesting for the attendees, and feel free to send questions my way should you have them.
Yeah, and just again, reminding everyone that you will, in about an hour, you'll get a link to access this course and the modules. And be sure to fill out our survey and receive your CE credit. And thank you again, Dr. Van Naz, for this educational presentation and for our sponsor, Trusted Dental Technologies. And you all be well.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of Spark Study Club. You can receive CE credit for this lecture by visiting sparkstudyclub.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.